The galaxy was vast, infinite in its mysteries, but even the Force had never whispered of rifts between realities. On Nar Shaddaa, the smuggler's moon orbiting the Hutt homeworld of Nal Hutta, the underbelly of civilization thrived in neon-soaked streets and blood-stained fighting pits. It was here, in the depths of a dimension-tearing anomaly above the moon's polluted skies, that something impossible tore through the fabric of space itself. A crimson streak of energy burned across the smog-choked atmosphere, screaming toward the industrial sector like a falling star wrapped in Soviet fury. The object, no, the man, crashed through the rusted roof of an abandoned Tabana gas refinery with enough force to crater the ferrocrete floor. Alarms wailed, scavengers scattered. And in the smoking impact zone, Arkady Rossovich, Omega Red, the Soviet Union's greatest and most terrible creation, dragged himself from unconsciousness into a galaxy that would soon learn to fear the Red Death. His body screamed in agony. The carbonadium coils embedded in his forearms burned with poisonous fire, the metal that kept him alive also killing him slowly always. But this pain was different, sharper. The air tasted wrong, too many alien chemical compounds, not enough familiar Earth pollutants. His regeneration struggled against injuries that should have healed in seconds. Through blurred vision, Omega Red saw strange architecture, heard alien languages, and smelled species he'd never encountered. This wasn't Russia, this wasn't even Earth. "Stang, that's a big one," a Rhodian's voice chittered in accented basic. "Gringlock, get the stun nets. The Hutts pay triple for live gladiators." Omega Red's lips curled into a predator's smile beneath his pale, scarred face. Gladiators, of course. No matter what dimension, criminals were always the same. He tried to rise, but his body betrayed him. The dimensional transit had drained him severely. The carbonadium poisoning burned hotter than ever, demanding fresh life energy to stabilize his cellular structure. He needed to feed. Soon. The scavengers moved in, 6 of them, a mix of species, wielding what appeared to be energy weapons and electrified nets. Primitive by Soviet standards, but effective against a weakened target. They surrounded him cautiously, speaking rapidly in that strange language, basic, his mind somehow translated touching knowledge that shouldn't exist in his head. The dimensional rift had burned information directly into his neurons. He understood them. Nar Shaddaa, Hutt Cartel, Galactic Empire. A galaxy far, far away from the Cold War that had created him. "Easy now, comrade," Omega Red rasped in perfect basic, the word comrade dripping with ironic venom. "I am in a very bad mood." They didn't heed the warning. The first stun net was launched. Omega Red's forearms flexed, and with a sound like tearing metal, the carbonadium tentacles erupted from the ports in his arms. 10 feet of articulated, razor-edged coils lashed out with serpentine speed, slicing through the energy net like it was tissue paper. The tentacles wrapped around the nearest scavenger, a Wiki with ritual scars, and squeezed. The scream lasted 3 seconds before the Death Spore took effect. Omega Red's pheromone aura, that invisible field of life-draining energy, pulsed outward in desperate hunger. The Wiki's eyes went wide. His skin, graying as vitality itself, was ripped from his cells and absorbed into Omega Red's failing system. The Russian gasped in relief as stolen life energy flooded his body, the carbonadium poisoning retreating, his wounds closing. The Wiki crumpled, a desiccated husk. "Chuba," one of the scavengers shouted Hutties, Omega Red's stolen knowledge supplied. They opened fire. Blaster bolts, bright red energy packets seared through the air. Omega Red's tentacles moved with superhuman precision, 2 coils deflecting bolts that would have cored his chest, another wrapping around a support beam to yank him out of the line of fire. He'd fought Wolverine, Colossus, the X-Men's finest. These pirates with their energy pistols were nothing. He landed among them like a crimson whirlwind. Carbonadium coils impaled a Rhodian through the chest, the metal punching through cheap armor plating with contemptuous ease. Another tentacle wrapped around a human scavenger's throat, draining him dry in seconds while Omega Red used the dying man as a shield against incoming fire. The remaining 3 broke and ran, screaming warnings in a dozen languages. Omega Red let them go. He had what he needed: life energy, information, and a growing understanding of this strange new galaxy. He examined one of the fallen blasters, noting its elegant simplicity compared to Soviet firearms. Energy weapons, faster than light travel, alien species working together. And something else, something his stolen knowledge called the Force, a mystical energy field that apparently governed this reality. "Fascinating," he murmured, his Russian accent thick even in basic. "New world, new prey, new opportunities." The sound of repulsor lifts drew his attention. 3 landspeeder-like vehicles descended into the refinery, carrying heavily armed guards in mismatched armor. These weren't scavengers. Professional soldiers moving with disciplined precision. Leading them was a massive figure, a Hutt, easily 8 feet tall, muscles like slabs of durasteel. "The Hutt Cartel claims this sector," the Hutt rumbled in basic. "You've killed 5 scavengers who pay protection fees. Surrender and Lord Gorga may let you live as an arena fighter. Resist and die here." Omega Red's tentacles coiled around his forearms, ready to strike. 20 guards, professional killers, against 1 weakened Soviet super soldier in an unfamiliar galaxy. The rational choice was surrender, gather intelligence, and strike later when stronger. But Arkady Rossovich had never been rational. He'd been built for war, conditioned for brutality, transformed into a living weapon that respected only strength. "I have a better idea," Omega Red said, his Death Spore aura beginning to pulse with renewed power. "You tell your Hutt master that Omega Red does not surrender, and if he wants me—" The Carbonadium tentacles erupted fully, 20 feet of lethal coils spreading around him like a mechanical Medusa's crown. "He can try to take me." The guards opened fire. Omega Red moved. Blaster bolts scorched the air, superheating metal and flash-burning ferrocrete where the Russian had stood milliseconds before. His tentacles gripped girders and support beams, launching him through 3-dimensional space with acrobatic precision that seemed impossible for a man his size. 2 coils speared downward, impaling guards through their visors before they could track his movement. Another tentacle wrapped around a repulsor lift bike, yanking it from the air and hurling it into a cluster of soldiers. But these weren't panicked scavengers. They adjusted, covering fields of fire, forcing Omega Red into defensive patterns. A thermal detonator arced through the air. Omega Red's tentacle batted it away, the explosive detonating against the refinery wall in a bloom of fire and shrapnel. The Hutt charged forward with a vibroaxe, the blade humming with enough energy to cut through his carbonadium coils. Omega Red met the charge head-on. His tentacles wrapped around the Hutt's weapon arm, stopping the axe inches from his face. The Death Spore pulsed at maximum intensity, but the Hutt's massive physiology resisted longer than humans, 10 seconds of agonized roaring before collapsing. Long enough for 3 guards to flank Omega Red with stun batons crackling with electrical energy. The batons struck simultaneously, chest, back, neck. Voltage meant to drop a Wookiee surged through Omega Red's nervous system. He screamed, tentacles flailing wildly, but his enhanced physiology absorbed punishment that would kill normal men. Through the electrical agony, he struck back. Carbonadium coils lashed out with berserk fury, cutting through armor, bone, and flesh without discrimination. When the electricity stopped, Omega Red stood among 15 corpses, breathing hard, his pale skin scorched with electrical burns already healing. 5 guards remained, weapons trained on him but fingers hesitant on triggers. They just watched him survive enough voltage to power a small city block. "Last chance," Omega Red rasped. "Run or join your friends." They ran. Omega Red allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before the reality of his situation crashed down. He was alone in an alien galaxy, weakened, hunted, and the carbonadium poisoning would eventually demand more life energy. He needed information, resources, and a way to survive until he could understand this new reality. The dead Hutt's comlink crackled with Hutties, more forces incoming, heavier weapons. Time to disappear into Nar Shaddaa's endless urban sprawl. as he vanished into the shadows of the industrial sector, leaving behind a scene that would become the Hutt Cartel's most disturbing crime scene in months. Omega Red considered his options. This galaxy had criminals, soldiers, and apparently mystical warriors. It had factions at war, technology beyond Earth's, and countless species to prey upon. For a weapon designed to kill without mercy, it was almost paradise. Almost, because Omega Red knew the truth. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a parasite, cursed to drain life from others or die from his own poisonous metal skeleton. In this vast galaxy of alien wonders, he was still a monster. The only question was whether he'd be their monster or his own. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Behind him, in the burning refinery, Hutt enforcers arrived to find carnage that would spark rumors across the outer rim. Whispers of a pale-skinned humanoid with metal tentacles and a touch that brought death. The Empire would hear those whispers. So would the rebellion. And in the dark corners of Nar Shaddaa, Lord Gorga the Hutt would place the first bounty on the head of the galaxy's newest nightmare. Omega Red smiled in the neon-lit darkness. Let them come. He'd survived the Soviet Union's super soldier program, battled the X-Men, and endured decades of carbonadium poisoning. This galaxy, with all its force users and energy weapons, would learn what Earth's mutants already knew. The Red Death had arrived, and it was hungry. The Inquisitors had eyes everywhere. 3 days after the Nar Shaddaa massacre, a coded transmission reached the Imperial Star Destroyer Vindication patrolling the Outer Rim territories. The report was fragmented, contradictory, but contained one detail that made Inquisitor's seventh sister pause her meditation. A humanoid with metallic appendages who killed through touch alone, seemingly immune to blaster fire, leaving victims drained of life. Force-resistant, life-draining, metallic weapons emerging from flesh. It sounded like a Sith artifact given humanoid form, or something worse, a threat the Empire couldn't afford to ignore. Within hours, Seventh Sister was descending toward Nar Shaddaa with a squad of purge troopers, her orders direct from the Inquisitorious command. Capture if possible, eliminate if necessary, but above all, ensure this creature didn't fall into rebel hands. She would find her quarry faster than anticipated. Omega Red had spent those 3 days learning to survive in the galaxy's criminal underbelly. Nar Shaddaa was a vertical city of 1 trillion beings, lawless and violent, where Hutt enforcers ruled through fear and credits bought anything, including information. He drained a Deveronian information broker to learn basic fluently, absorbed the life of a retired Imperial officer to understand galactic politics, and killed a Trandosh enslaver to discover the uncomfortable truth about droids. They were everywhere, sentient machines with personalities, rights in some systems, treated as property in others, and his Death Spore couldn't affect them. No biological systems meant nothing to drain. Against the Empire's seemingly endless droid armies, he was vulnerable in ways he'd never been on Earth. The Carbonadium coils worked perfectly. He tested them against a gang of Nikto enforcers, the metal slicing through their cortosis weave armor like it was nothing. But cortosis itself, that ore that shorted out lightsabers, made his tentacles lock up temporarily when he'd accidentally struck a vein of it in an abandoned mine. This galaxy had materials that could counter him. He needed to be smarter, more tactical. Smarter meant staying off the Hutt Cartel's radar. Omega Red had taken refuge in the Corellian sector, a slightly less murderous district where smugglers and spacers gathered. He'd been draining victims carefully, addicts, criminals, beings who wouldn't be missed, just enough life energy to keep the carbonadium poisoning at bay. But careful wasn't in his nature, and the body count was rising. That's when the Inquisitor found him. Omega Red was leaving a cantina called the Slippery Een, having just drained a Wiki spice dealer in the back alley when he felt it. A pressure against his mind, like invisible fingers probing his thoughts. His Soviet conditioning kicked in, mental resistance training designed to counter telepaths. The pressure intensified, became almost painful, then withdrew. "Interesting," a female voice said from the shadows. "You can resist the Force. How? Unprecedented." Seventh Sister emerged from the darkness between flickering neon signs, her red-bladed lightsaber ignited and spinning in a lazy circle. The weapon's crimson glow reflected off her gray skin and Mirialan tattoos. Behind her, 6 purge troopers in black armor leveled blaster rifles equipped with electric stun settings. Omega Red's tentacles slid free with metallic whispers. "If you are here to arrest me, little girl, I suggest you bring more friends." "I'm here to offer you a choice," Seventh Sister said, circling him with predatory grace. "The Galactic Empire is always seeking talented individuals. Your abilities, whatever you are, could serve a greater purpose, or you can die in this filthy alley like the parasite you appear to be." "Parasite?" Omega Red's laugh was bitter, humorless. "Yes, that is an accurate word, but I serve no government ever again. Your empire smells like fascism wrapped in bureaucracy. I've seen this before." "Then you've seen what happens to those who refuse," she gestured. The purge troopers opened fire. Stun bolts screamed through the air, blue rings of energy designed to incapacitate without killing. Omega Red's carbonadium coils moved with superhuman speed, deflecting bolts that would have dropped a rancor. 2 tentacles lashed out, wrapping around a trooper and yanking him close. The Death Spore pulsed. The trooper's scream was muffled by his helmet as vitality drained away in seconds. Seventh Sister moved. Her lightsaber was a blur of crimson death, slicing through one of Omega Red's tentacles. The carbonadium resisted for a split second, far longer than Durasteel would have, but the plasma blade was 3,000 degrees of focused energy. The tentacle severed with a spray of sparks and the stench of superheated metal. Omega Red roared in pain and fury. The severed coil retracted into his forearm, already beginning to regenerate. His remaining tentacles attacked with renewed ferocity, forcing Seventh Sister into a defensive pattern. She was fast, force-enhanced reflexes keeping her ahead of strikes that would have impaled her 5 times over. But Omega Red had fought Psylocke, battled telepaths and precognitives. He adapted. Instead of attacking where she was, he attacked where she would be. Tentacles swept low, high, and center simultaneously, creating a killing zone with no escape route. Seventh Sister leapt vertically, using the force to launch herself 10 feet straight up. Omega Red was already moving, one coil wrapping around a neon sign and yanking himself upward to meet her. They collided in midair. His tentacle wrapped around her lightsaber arm, the carbonadium coils resisting the plasma blade's heat for precious seconds. His other hand reached for her throat, Death Spore aura flaring to maximum intensity. Seventh Sister's eyes widened as she felt her life energy beginning to drain, that horrible sensation of cellular death creeping through her force-enhanced body. But she was an Inquisitor, trained by Darth Vader himself. Pain was a tool. She released her lightsaber, letting it fall, and thrust both hands toward Omega Red's chest. Force lightning erupted from her fingertips, blue-white energy crackling across his body. It was agony beyond anything Omega Red had experienced since his initial carbonadium surgery. The electricity didn't just shock, it burned through the force itself, attacking his nervous system on a metaphysical level. He released her involuntarily, both of them crashing to the filthy alley ground. The purge troopers moved in, electrostaffs crackling. Omega Red was faster, even hurt. His tentacles swept in a circle, cutting through 2 troopers at the waist. The others fell back, coordinating fire. Stun bolts caught him from 3 angles. His body convulsed, tentacles thrashing wildly, but he didn't fall. The carbonadium in his system conducted electricity differently than flesh. It hurt like hell. But it also distributed the voltage across his metallic skeleton, rather than concentrating in his brain. Seventh Sister retrieved her lightsaber, breathing hard. The brief contact with his Death Spore had left her weakened, with gray skin paler than usual. "What are you?" she demanded. "Soviet science experiment," Omega Red growled, rising to his feet despite the electricity still arcing across his body. "Weapon designed to kill American mutants, but the Soviet Union is gone and I am free." "Free?" she laughed. "You're dying, I can sense it. That metal in your body, it's poisoning you. You drain life just to survive another day. That's not freedom, that's a slow execution." The words hit harder than her force lightning. Omega Red's tentacles coiled defensively. She was right. The carbonadium poisoning was worse here, in this galaxy with its strange atmospheric compositions and alien biology. He'd need to drain more frequently, kill more often. He'd become exactly what the Soviet Union designed, a walking atrocity. "Empire can help you," Seventh Sister continued, sensing his hesitation. "Our scientists, our technology. We've created the Inquisitors, cybernetically enhanced the wounded, and rebuilt Darth Vader himself from charred flesh. We could stabilize your condition. All you have to do is serve." Omega Red considered it, really considered it. The Empire had resources and technology beyond Earth's. They'd rebuilt a man who'd been burned alive. Maybe they could cure him or at least stop the endless hunger. He could be more than a parasite. He could be. No, he'd heard these promises before. The Soviet Union had promised to make him a hero, a guardian of the motherland. Instead, they'd made him a monster and aimed him at their enemies. The Empire wore different uniforms, spoke a different language, but power was power. They'd use him until he was spent, then discard him. "I have a counterproposal," Omega Red said, his tentacles spreading wide. "You leave now, tell your Empire that Omega Red is not interested in service, or I kill you and your soldiers, and the Empire learns a hard lesson about recruiting." Seventh Sister's lightsaber hummed. "You can't win. I've felt your power, it's crude, biological, limited. The Force is infinite, and even if you kill me, the Empire will send others, Inquisitors, Vader himself if necessary. You'll be hunted across every system." "Then I will die fighting instead of serving," Omega Red replied. "Is the Russian way." They stood in the alley, two predators weighing odds and consequences. The remaining Purge troopers had their weapons trained on Omega Red, but they'd seen what he could do. Seventh Sister's Force sense told her he was weakened but not beaten. A fight to the death might succeed, but she'd likely die in the process. And the Inquisitors had lost too many already. "This isn't over," she said finally, deactivating her lightsaber. "The Empire marks you as a hostile entity. Every bounty hunter, every Imperial patrol will have your description. You've made a powerful enemy today." "Is not the first time," Omega Red said. "Will not be last." Seventh Sister and her remaining troopers withdrew, repulsor lifts carrying them back toward their shuttle. But Omega Red wasn't naive. She'd be back with reinforcements, better prepared. The Empire now knew he existed, knew his capabilities. Worse, they knew his weakness, the carbonadium poisoning that made him a slave to his hunger. He needed allies, resources, a way to survive in a galaxy where the dominant power wanted him captured or killed. As Omega Red disappeared into Nar Shaddaa's neon-soaked warrens, he considered his limited options. Criminals would betray him for credits. The Empire wanted to enslave him. That left. The rebellion. He'd heard whispers in cantinas, seen recruitment propaganda, freedom fighters opposing imperial tyranny. Romantic nonsense, probably, but desperate times made strange alliances. If the Empire wanted him as a weapon, maybe the rebels would settle for him as what? An ally seemed too generous. A temporary asset, perhaps. Omega Red's lips curled into a predator's smile. The rebellion wouldn't like what they found, but they'd need to accept it anyway. Because in this vast galaxy of aliens and Force users, one truth remained constant. Monsters survived where heroes died, and Arkady Rossovich was nothing if not a survivor. The Rebel Alliance operated in shadows, whispers, and desperate hope. On Nar Shaddaa, that meant a small cell led by a former Jedi Padawan named Tyson V. Hall, a Zabrak who'd survived Order 66 by abandoning his lightsaber and pretending the Force had never touched him. When intelligence reports mentioned an Imperial Inquisitor deploying to the smuggler's moon for an unspecified target, Tyson's instincts screamed opportunity. Whatever the Empire wanted badly enough to send an Inquisitor, the rebellion should want to deny them. His team consisted of 6 operatives: himself, 2 human ex-Republic soldiers named Kale and Myra, a Twi'lek slicer called Nyla, a Wookiee demolitions expert named Giaruaka, and a former Imperial logistics officer named Lieutenant Sarek who defected after Alderaan. They were good, professional, and experienced, but they weren't prepared for what they'd find. Tyson had tracked the Inquisitors' movements through informants and security cam slicing. The confrontation in the Corellian sector had been brief, violent, and resulted in 4 dead Purge troopers. Whoever the target was, they'd survived an encounter with Seventh Sister, a feat that impressed and terrified Tyson equally. The security footage was corrupted, but witnesses described a pale humanoid with metal appendages. Could be a droid, Myra suggested as they reviewed intelligence in their safe house, a converted warehouse in the refugee district. Droids don't make Inquisitors retreat, Kale countered. This is something else, maybe a separatist weapon that survived the Clone Wars. Tyson studied the scattered reports, feeling the Force whisper warnings he couldn't quite interpret. Whatever it is, the Empire wants it. That makes it valuable to us. We extract the target, offer asylum, and if they're willing, recruit them. And if they're not willing, Lieutenant Sarek asked. Then we make sure the Empire doesn't get them either, Tyson said grimly. One way or another. They found Omega Red 2 days later in the industrial bowels of Nar Shaddaa's lower levels, where even Hutt patrols rarely ventured. He'd been hunting. A Rhodian smuggler lay dead against a corroded durasteel wall, skin gray and desiccated. Omega Red crouched over the body, breathing hard, carbonadium coils retracted into his forearms. The stolen life energy was already fatting, the poisoning demanding more. Contact, Kale whispered into his comlink. Confirming target. Human male, pale complexion, augmented with Force help us, those are metal tentacles. Tyson activated his throat mic. All units non-lethal approach. We're here to extract, not eliminate. Omega Red, he used the name they'd gleaned from street informants, we're with the Rebel Alliance. The Empire is hunting you. We can offer protection. Omega Red's head snapped toward their position with predatory speed. His enhanced senses had detected them despite their stealth. Rebels, he said in accented basic, rising to his full height. Come to save the monster from the Empire. How? Touching. We're here to help, Tyson said, stepping into view with hands raised peacefully. The Force swirled around Omega Red strangely, not absent like around droids, but wrong, tainted with death and hunger. The Empire wants to use you as a weapon. We're offering you a choice. Choice? Omega Red's laugh was bitter. Everyone offers choice, then takes it away. The Soviet Union offered me glory, gave me poison instead. What do you offer, Jedi? Tyson stiffened. His connection to the Force was carefully suppressed, hidden behind mental shields. I'm not. You have smell, Omega Red interrupted, tapping his nose. Not physical smell, something else, like Inquisitor woman but different, cleaner. You are a Jedi, yes, or were. There was no point denying it. Former Padawan, I left the Order behind when it fell. Smart, institutions are chains. Omega Red's tentacles slid free, 20 feet of carbonadium coils spreading around him like a metal spider's legs. Now you work for a new institution. Different chain, same slavery. The rebellion fights for freedom, Myra said, stepping forward with her blaster lowered. We're trying to. Omega Red moved with shocking speed, one tentacle lashing out to wrap around Myra's waist. She screamed as the coil lifted her off the ground, pulling her toward him. The other rebels raised weapons, but Tyson shouted, "Hold fire!" Omega Red held Myra suspended between them, close enough that his Death Spore aura washed over her. She gasped, feeling vitality beginning to drain, skin paling. "You want to help me?" Omega Red asked quietly. "Then understand what I am. I need to drain life to survive, not want need. Without it, carbonadium poisoning kills me in days. So tell me, Rebel Alliance, how does your freedom-loving organization handle a necessary monster?" Tyson felt the Force screaming danger, but he forced calm into his voice. "Release her. We can discuss this." "Can you cure me?" Omega Red demanded. "Can your rebellion remove carbonadium from my skeleton, stop the poisoning, make me human again?" "Silence." "I thought not." Omega Red's grip loosened slightly. Myra was gasping, weak but alive. "You want to use me just like Empire. Point me at Imperial soldiers, let me drain their officers, watch me kill until I am no longer useful. Then what? Execute the monster who did your dirty work." "That's not," Tyson started. "Is exactly what you will do," Omega Red roared. "I have lived this life. The Soviet Union created me to kill, then feared what they made. Empire wants a weapon, Rebellion wants a weapon. Everyone wants Omega Red to be their attack dog." The tentacle squeezed Myra tighter. Her scream was weaker now, life energy flowing into him. "Maybe I should just take what I need from you, drain this woman, kill you all, and continue alone." Giaruaka roared, raising a bowcaster. Nyla's fingers flew across her datapad, trying to trigger emergency signals. Kale and Lieutenant Sarek aimed center mass, knowing blasters were nearly useless. Tyson stood frozen, weighing impossible choices. If he attacked with the Force, revealed himself fully, he'd violate everything he'd hidden for years. If he didn't, Myra would die. The Force chose him. Tyson thrust both hands forward, telekinetic energy slamming into Omega Red like an invisible battering ram. The Russian flew backward, releasing Myra, crashing through a corroded support column. His tentacles caught him mid-fall, absorbing the impact that should have shattered bones. "Get her out," Tyson commanded. Kale grabbed Myra, who was barely conscious, and fell back. Giaruaka's bowcaster bolt screamed past Omega Red's head, a warning shot that left molten metal in the wall. Omega Red rose from the rubble, laughing. "There is a Jedi, hiding behind a rebel mask, pretending to be a soldier, but when threatened, Force user shows truth." His tentacles coiled for attack. "You are all the same. Peaceful until you need violence, then you use beings like me to do killing." "I won't let you hurt them," Tyson said, his connection to the Force fully open now, lightsaber hilt appearing in his hand though he didn't ignite it. "But I'm not your enemy. The Empire is." "Empire, Rebellion, Jedi, Sith, all the same." Omega Red's Death Spore pulsed outward, forcing the rebels back. Even Tyson felt it, the unnatural draining effect that bypassed Force defenses because it wasn't mystical. It was biological, viral, a plague given consciousness. "You all want to use me until I am spent." "Then what do you want?" Tyson shouted. "To die alone in this toxic moon, to keep killing until someone finally puts you down. There has to be more than that." The question hit Omega Red like a physical blow. What did he want? Cure was impossible. Even Soviet science couldn't remove carbonadium without killing him. Freedom was an illusion. He was chained to his hunger. Power. He had power, and it had bought him nothing but isolation and fear. "I want," Omega Red started, then stopped. His tentacles lowered slightly. "I want to choose who I drain, not random victims, not innocents. If I must be a parasite, I choose my prey." Tyson sensed truth in the words, an opening. "Then choose Imperial officers, slavers, Hutt enforcers. The galaxy is full of beings who deserve what you can do." "And when I have drained all your approved targets," Omega Red asked, "when I need more life energy and only your rebel soldiers are available, what then?" "Then we find more slavers," Tyson said. "The Empire has millions of them." It was a fragile truce, built on desperation and mutual need. Omega Red studied the rebels, seeing hope despite everything their galaxy had suffered. Naive, perhaps, but also genuine. They actually believed their rebellion could win. "I will not join you," Omega Red said finally, "but I will not kill you today. Consider it professional courtesy between those who fight the Empire." "That's not good enough," Lieutenant Sarek said, helping support the weakened Myra. "You nearly killed one of ours. We can't just let you walk away." "Then try to stop me," Omega Red challenged, tentacles spreading wide. "See how many of you die before you succeed. Or accept that sometimes enemy of your enemy is not friend, is just useful." Tyson felt the force flowing through possible futures. If they fought, 3 rebels would die before Omega Red fell. If they let him go, he'd kill again. But maybe those deaths would be Imperial. A terrible calculation, trading unknown victims for the certain survival of his team. "Go," Tyson said quietly. "But know this, if you prey on innocence, if you become what the Empire wants you to be, we'll hunt you. And next time I won't hold back." Omega Red's smile was cold, predatory. "If you hunt me, Jedi who is not Jedi, bring many friends. You will need them." He vanished into the industrial maze, Carbonadium coils pulling him up into the ventilation systems with spider-like grace. The rebels were left in the aftermath, Myra barely alive, their mission a failure, and a dangerous new variable loose in the outer rim. "We should have killed him," Kale said bitterly. "Maybe," Tyson admitted. "Or maybe we just avoided creating another enemy. The Force is unclear." What the Force was clear about was that Omega Red's presence in the galaxy had drawn attention from powers far beyond the Inquisitors. In the shadows of Nar Shaddaa, Hutt spies reported the encounter to their masters. In Imperial command centers, Seventh Sister filed updated threat assessments. And in distant rebel outposts, intelligence officers noted the emergence of a being who could resist Force users and drain life with a touch. Omega Red had become a factor in the galactic civil war. Not a soldier for either side, but a wild card that could tip battles through sheer destructive potential. The question was no longer whether factions would try to use him. The question was how many would die trying. The galaxy learned to fear the Red Death over the following weeks. Omega Red moved through the outer rim like a biological plague, leaving a trail of desiccated corpses that defied medical explanation. Imperial garrisons reported attacks on supply convoys, officers drained dry, their life essence stolen. Hutt enforcers vanished from their posts, found days later as withered husks. Even the Rebel Alliance received fragmentary reports of a pale-skinned killer, with metal appendages operating in contested space. No faction could claim him. No organization could control him. Omega Red had become exactly what he'd promised, a force unto himself, preying on those he deemed deserving while evading capture through brutal efficiency and enhanced instincts. But survival in a galaxy at war required more than just killing. It required understanding the battlefield. Omega Red had established a pattern: strike Imperial targets for life energy and supplies, avoid rebel cells unless directly threatened, and eliminate anyone, bounty hunter, mercenary, or assassin, stupid enough to chase the growing bounty on his head. The Empire had placed 50,000 credits on him, alive. The Hutt Cartel had countered with 75,000 dead or alive. He'd become valuable enough to attract serious hunters. The first serious attempt came on Ryloth, where Omega Red had been draining a corrupt Imperial Moff who'd enslaved Twi'lek villages. The bounty hunter was a Mandalorian named Torvald Wren, clanless but skilled, wearing Beskar armor that made him nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Their fight in the Moff's palace had been brief and vicious: Carbonadium tentacles versus Beskar plating, Death Spore versus sealed environmental systems. Omega Red won, but barely. The Mandalorian's armor resisted his draining aura completely, and Beskar turned his tentacle strikes into glancing blows. He'd only triumphed by exploiting gaps in the armor joints, carbonadium coils sliding between plates to strike flesh. The Mandalorian died hard, warrior to the end. But the encounter taught Omega Red a crucial lesson. This galaxy had counters to him. Sealed armor negated his Death Spore. Certain metals resisted his tentacles. Droids were immune to his primary weapon. He needed to adapt, to fight smarter instead of relying on brute force. That adaptation led him to Ord Mantell, a junk world where crashed starships were stripped for parts and sold to the highest bidder. Omega Red needed weapons, technology, anything that could level the playing field against enemies his powers couldn't touch. The scrapyards were controlled by a Pike Syndicate operation, criminals who wouldn't question a paying customer's intentions. He was examining a cache of confiscated Imperial weapons, thermal detonators, concussion grenades, even a man-portable E-Web blaster cannon, when he felt the familiar mental pressure of a Force user. Not the probing curiosity of the Inquisitor, but something colder, hungrier. "You have expensive tastes for a fugitive," a cultured voice said. Omega Red turned to find a human male in dark robes, face hidden beneath a hood. But it wasn't the robes that caught his attention. It was the red lightsaber hanging from the man's belt, and the aura of corruption that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. Dark side. His stolen knowledge provided the term instantly. "And you are?" Omega Red asked, tentacles sliding free cautiously. "I am Jarek, once a Jedi, now something far greater." The hood fell back, revealing a Muraluka's eyeless face, skin marked with ritual scars. "I serve no empire, no rebellion. I seek knowledge, power, the secrets of the Force. And you, Omega Red, are an anomaly that intrigues me." "Not interested in being studied," Omega Red said flatly. Jarek laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "I'm not here to capture you. The Empire's leash chafes, the Rebellion's righteousness bores me. But you're a weapon that feeds on life itself. Do you understand what that means in terms of the Force?" "I do not use your mystical energy," Omega Red replied. "No, but you disrupt it. Every life you drain creates a wound in the Force, a tiny scar in reality's fabric. The more you kill, the more the dark side strengthens in your wake." Jarek stepped closer, seemingly unconcerned about the Death Spore aura. "You're a plague to the light, a tool that could tip the balance toward darkness without even realizing it." Omega Red's eyes narrowed. "You want to recruit me for your dark side philosophy. Everyone wants to recruit Omega Red." "I want to offer you truth," Jarek corrected. "The Jedi preach balance but suppress passion. The Sith embrace power but demand subservience. You exist outside their paradigm, a being who takes life by necessity, not choice. What if I told you there were ways to enhance your abilities? Ancient Sith techniques that could amplify your draining powers, extend your range, even allow you to store life energy for longer periods." For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Omega Red felt genuine temptation. Not the Empire's false promises of cure, not the Rebellion's naive appeals to morality. This was something different, the offer to become more than a parasite, to master his curse instead of being mastered by it. "What do you want in return?" Omega Red asked, because there was always a price. "Simple cooperation. I seek a place called the Valley of the Jedi, where thousands of Force users died in ancient battle. Their spirits remain trapped, an ocean of power waiting to be claimed. But the valley is guarded, both by Jedi traditions and Imperial interest. I need insurance, a weapon that can kill Force users without relying on the Force itself." "You want me to be your attack dog," Omega Red said. "Different master, same collar." "I want an ally," Jarek insisted. "Equal partnership. You help me claim the valley's power, I teach you Sith techniques to control your hunger. Afterward, we go our separate ways, me with knowledge, you with mastery over your condition." It was a lie. Omega Red knew it instinctively. Jarek would betray him the moment the valley was claimed, either trying to drain Omega Red's life energy himself or simply abandoning him. Sith were predictable in their treachery. His stolen Imperial knowledge had taught him that. But there was a seed of truth in the offer. Ancient Sith techniques might actually help him, and if Jarek thought he could control Omega Red, the Dark Sider was welcome to try. Arkady Rossovich had survived the Soviet Union's super soldier program, endured decades of carbonadium poisoning, and battled Earth's most powerful mutants. One fallen Jedi with delusions of grandeur didn't frighten him. "I will consider your proposal," Omega Red said carefully, "but I work alone until I decide otherwise. Where can I find you?" Jarek smiled, clearly believing he'd hooked his prey. "I'll find you. The Force is generous with those who serve the dark side." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Omega Red. The Empire has deployed Inquisitors' 6th brother and 9th sister toward Mantel. They'll be here within the hour. I'd suggest concluding your business quickly." The warning was genuine. Omega Red's enhanced senses caught the distant sound of Imperial shuttle engines. Jarek vanished into the scrapyard crowds, leaving Omega Red with difficult choices. Stay and fight 2 Inquisitors simultaneously, likely dying in the process. Run and abandon the weapons he needed. Or take what he could carry and improvise. Omega Red grabbed a bandolier of thermal detonators, a Cortosis Weave vibroblade, and the E-Web blaster cannon's power cell, small enough to carry but potent if weaponized. He'd learned basic technology during his years in the Soviet program. Adapting Imperial tech to serve his needs would be challenging but possible. The Inquisitors arrived as he was leaving through the scrapyard's rear exit. 6th brother was Sakian, his amphibian features twisted with dark side corruption. 9th sister was massive, a Daotin female with cybernetic augmentations and a double-bladed lightsaber that she spun with terrifying ease. Both were accompanied by 2 squads of purge troopers. "Target acquired," 6th brother announced, his voice artificially modulated. "Surrender, abomination. The Emperor wishes to study you personally." "Emperor can study corpse," Omega Red replied, his tentacles spreading wide. "I send him yours." The battle that followed would become legend in Imperial intelligence files. Omega Red fought with calculated fury, using the scrapyard's terrain against his enemies. Carbonadium coils hurled wrecked speeders at advancing troopers, crushed AT-AT walker legs to create barriers, and yanked down precariously balanced ship hulls to block lightsaber strikes. 6th brother moved like liquid death, his lightsaber style aggressive and unpredictable. But Omega Red had fought Psylocke's telekinetic blades, Wolverine's adamantium claws. Lightsabers were faster, hotter, but the principle was the same: don't let them touch you. His tentacles created a whirling barrier of carbonadium, each coil moving independently to intercept strikes. 9th sister was the real threat. Her cybernetics resisted his Death Spore partially. Life energy drained slower from mechanical components, and her raw strength rivaled his own. When she grabbed one of his tentacles with her cybernetic hand, the lightsaber-resistant metal screamed as her grip threatened to crush it. Omega Red triggered a thermal detonator. The explosion caught 9th sister centermass, hurling her backward through a stack of derelict X-Wing fighters. Her armor saved her life, but the blast stunned her long enough for Omega Red to focus on 6th brother. The Sakian Inquisitor was fast, but Omega Red was faster. A tentacle wrapped around the Inquisitor's lightsaber arm, another around his throat. The Death Spore pulsed at maximum intensity. 6th brother's scream was inhuman as life energy ripped from his cells. The dark side fought back, corruption and rot battling Omega Red's draining effect in a horrific feedback loop. For a moment, Omega Red felt something impossible, the dark side feeding him, negative energy flowing into his carbonadium skeleton like poison satisfying poison. Then 6th brother's body collapsed into ash, his life completely consumed. Omega Red staggered, drunk on stolen vitality that tasted wrong, tainted. The dark side energy burned through his system like acid, fighting his natural regeneration. Jarek had been right. He did affect the Force when he killed, but the effect was mutual. Force user's life energy was different, saturated with mystical power that his body struggled to process. Ninth Sister recovered, roaring fury, her double-bladed lightsaber a spinning wheel of death. Omega Red had seconds to react. He grabbed the E-Web power cell, overloaded it manually, and hurled it with superhuman strength. The Inquisitor's Force precognition warned her. She dove aside as the power cell detonated with the force of 20 thermal detonators. The scrapyard's southern section vanished in a mushroom cloud of fire and shrapnel. Omega Red was already running, Carbonadium coils pulling him through the chaos. Behind him, Ninth Sister dragged herself from the wreckage, armor scorched, one cybernetic leg malfunctioning. She screamed orders for reinforcements, but Omega Red was gone, vanished into Ord Mantell's industrial underbelly. He'd survived, barely, and learned crucial truths. Force users could be killed, but their energy was poison to him. The Empire would keep sending Inquisitors until he was captured or dead, and Jarek's offer, however treacherous, might be his only path to gaining power enough to survive. Omega Red found an abandoned warehouse and collapsed, body convulsing as it purged Sixth Brother's tainted life energy. The dark side corruption fought his healing factor, creating a battle within his cells that lasted hours. When he finally recovered, weak and shaking, he made a decision. He would find Jarek, learn what Sith techniques could teach him, and if the fallen Jedi proved treacherous, which he would, Omega Red would add another corpse to his growing legend. The Red Death had come to the Star Wars galaxy, and it was learning to hunt Force users. The Valley of the Jedi was a myth whispered among Force sensitives, a hidden sanctuary on Ruusan where thousands of Jedi and Sith had died in a final, cataclysmic battle millennia ago. Their spirits remained trapped in the planet's depths, an ocean of light and dark side energy waiting to empower whoever could harness it. Jarek had spent decades researching its location, and now, with coordinates finally deciphered from a Sith holocron, he was ready to claim ultimate power. He just needed Omega Red to clear the way. The unlikely alliance had formed over 3 weeks of uneasy cooperation. Jarek taught Omega Red rudimentary dark side meditation techniques, not to make him Force sensitive, but to help him control the life energy absorption, to store it longer and release it in controlled bursts rather than constant draining. The techniques worked partially. Omega Red could now go days between feedings instead of hours, though the Carbonadium poisoning remained a constant presence. In return, Omega Red served as Jarek's blunt instrument. They raided an Imperial research station studying ancient Jedi artifacts, with Omega Red's immunity to Force persuasion proving invaluable against the facility's Inquisitor guards. They infiltrated a rebel listening post that had intercepted transmissions about Ruusan, leaving no survivors to report their interest. The body count climbed into the hundreds. Omega Red felt nothing about the killing. These were soldiers, spies, government operatives, the same breed who'd made him a weapon. But he noticed Jarek growing stronger with each death, feeding on the dark side energy that accompanied violence. The fallen Jedi was using him, obviously, but the reverse was also true. Omega Red was learning this galaxy's power structures, understanding how Force users thought and fought. When they finally arrived at Ruusan in Jarek's stolen Imperial shuttle, they weren't alone. The Empire had deployed a full garrison, 3 ATSD walkers, 2 companies of stormtroopers, and Commander Yun, a tactical genius who'd never lost an engagement. Imperial intelligence had tracked Jarek's movements, predicted his destination, and prepared a trap. The Valley of the Jedi would be the fallen Jedi's grave. But they hadn't accounted for Omega Red. The rebellion had also sent forces, Tyson Vihal's cell, reinforced with 2 squads of Spec Force commandos and a recovered Myra, who'd volunteered specifically to stop the Russian monster who'd nearly killed her. Their intelligence suggested Jarek sought a superweapon that could tip the galactic balance. They couldn't allow the Empire to claim it, but they also couldn't let a dark sider possess it. And the Hutt Cartel, always opportunistic, had dispatched a mercenary army led by the Hauk warlord Gragok the Unkillable. Lord Gorga still wanted revenge for the Nar Shaddaa massacres, and Gragok commanded 300 killers who didn't care about Force mysticism. They just wanted Omega Red's head. 3 armies converged on Rusin's northern continent as binary suns set over ancient battlefields. The Valley of the Jedi waited in the planet's crust, its entrance hidden in a canyon system that would become a killing ground. Jarek sensed the trap immediately. The Empire knows we're here, rebels too, and others. His eyeless face turned toward Omega Red. This is where you earn your Sith knowledge. Kill them all. I need time to reach the valley's heart and claim its power. You go alone? Omega Red asked suspiciously. The valley's entrance is attuned to Force sensitives. Your presence would disrupt the ritual. Jarek's hand rested on his lightsaber. Unless you'd prefer I leave you to face 3 armies without the enhanced abilities I've promised. It was the betrayal Omega Red had anticipated, just arriving earlier than expected. Jarek would claim the valley's power, then either abandon him or attempt to dominate him through superior Force mastery. But Omega Red had his own plan. Let the Dark Sider think he was winning. Let him enter the valley. And when Jarek emerged drunk on stolen power, Omega Red would be waiting to drain the life from a Force user saturated with energy beyond imagining. I will hold them, Omega Red said, but you remember our deal. Of course, Jarek lied smoothly. He descended into the canyon, violet lightsaber, igniting to illuminate ancient stone steps that hadn't been walked in centuries. Omega Red turned to face the converging armies. In the distance, ATST walkers marched in formation, their dual laser cannons tracking for targets. Rebel commandos moved through the canyon's eastern approach using guerrilla tactics. Hutt mercenaries approached from the west in a disorganized mob that relied on overwhelming firepower. And Omega Red stood alone in the center, Carbonadium tentacles spreading like a metal flower, Death Spore aura beginning to pulse with controlled intensity. Come, he whispered to the gathering darkness, learn why the Soviet Union feared me. The Imperial forces struck first. Commander Yun had studied the fragmentary reports on Omega Red's capabilities and devised a counter-strategy, concentrated fire from maximum range using ATST walkers, with stormtroopers providing supporting volleys. No close combat, no hand-to-hand, just overwhelming firepower that would vaporize the target before he could close the distance. It was a sound strategy. It failed within 30 seconds. Omega Red's tentacles lashed out with impossible range, Carbonadium coils extending 40 feet to wrap around an ATST's leg. He yanked, superhuman strength augmented by weeks of stored life energy. The walker toppled, crashing into its companion in a tangle of metal and screaming pilots. The third walker's laser cannons tracked, fired, twin bolts of coherent light that should have cored Omega Red's chest. His tentacles moved faster than human reflexes, deflecting one bolt into the canyon wall, absorbing the other's impact across multiple coils that glowed white-hot but didn't sever. Then he was moving, sprinting toward the Imperial line with speed that defied his mass. Stormtrooper blasters opened fire in coordinated volleys. Omega Red wove through the barrage, tentacles creating a shield of whirling carbonadium, each coil moving independently to intercept or deflect shots. He hit the Imperial line like an avalanche of metal and fury. Carbonadium tentacles impaled through white armor as if it were paper, each strike followed by the Death Spore's lethal pulse. Stormtroopers screamed and died, their life energy flooding into Omega Red's system, making him faster, stronger, and more dangerous with each kill. Commander Yun shouted orders to fall back, to regroup, but panic had seized his forces. They'd expected a monster. They found a force of nature. The rebel commandos seized the opportunity, attacking the Imperial flank while Omega Red shredded their center. Tyson led the charge. his suppressed force abilities finally unleashed in desperate necessity. He leapt into battle with twin blaster pistols, enhanced reflexes allowing him to place shots with surgical precision. Beside him, Giaroaka's bowcaster roared, each bolt punching through stormtrooper armor with savage efficiency. Myra spotted Omega Red through the chaos. Memories of suffocation, of life being drained away, fueled her hatred. She raised a portable missile launcher, acquired target lock, and fired. The concussion missile streaked toward Omega Red, trailing smoke and death. Omega Red's enhanced senses detected it. One tentacle wrapped around a dying stormtrooper, hurling the body into the missile's path. The explosion vaporized the corpse and showered the battlefield with shrapnel. Through the smoke, Omega Red's pale face emerged, smiling with predatory satisfaction. "Rebel girl," he called to Myra across the battlefield. "You want revenge? Come take it." Myra's finger tightened on another trigger, but Tyson grabbed her arm. "Focus on the mission. Jarek is the priority." "That thing nearly killed me," Myra snarled. "And he's killing Imperials now." Tyson pointed to where Omega Red had just torn through an entire stormtrooper squad. "Enemy of our enemy, remember. Let him do our work." It was brutal calculus, the same decision Tyson had made on Nar Shaddaa. Use the monster, direct his violence toward mutual enemies, and deal with him later if he survives. But the galaxy had a way of punishing such compromises. Gragok's mercenaries arrived like a tidal wave of violence. 300 killers from a dozen species, armed with everything from vibroblades to heavy repeating blasters. They didn't care about tactics or strategy. They wanted Omega Red dead, and the bounty claimed. They charged both Imperial and Rebel positions indiscriminately, turning the canyon into a three-way slaughter. Omega Red laughed, a sound without sanity or mercy. This was what he'd been built for, not skulking in shadows, not pretending to be civilized. War, pure, simple, honest. His tentacles became a whirlwind of death, cutting through mercenaries with mechanical precision while his Death Spore aura pulsed in waves that left corpses in expanding circles. A Trandoshan bounty hunter with cortosis weave armor got close enough to swing a vibro axe at Omega Red's head. The Russian caught the blade between two tentacles, snapped it, and drove the broken handle through the Trandoshan's eye socket. A Wiki with a flamethrower bathed him in fire. Omega Red's regeneration healed the burns as fast as they formed, and he drained the Wiki dry as thanks. Gragok himself waded into combat, a mountain of muscle, wielding a vibraclub that could shatter durasteel. The Hauk had earned his title, the Unkillable, through decades of surviving battles that should have killed him. He roared a challenge, smashing aside Omega Red's tentacles with brute strength. The impact of Hauk muscle against Carbonadium coils created shockwaves that cracked the canyon floor. Omega Red wrapped 3 tentacles around Gragok's club arm, braced himself, and pulled. The Hauk's shoulder dislocated with a wet pop. Gragok's response was to punch Omega Red in the face with his remaining arm, hitting hard enough to shatter a human skull. Omega Red's head snapped back, nose broken, but he was already regenerating. His Death Spore pulsed at maximum intensity, draining life from Gragok at point-blank range. The Hauk's incredible physiology resisted longer than any being Omega Red had encountered. 20 seconds of agonized roaring before finally collapsing, life consumed. The mercenary army broke. 300 killers had been reduced to less than 50 in minutes, and their leader was a withered corpse. They scattered into Rusin's wilderness, abandoning the bounty, the battle, everything except survival. The Imperial forces weren't faring better. Commander Yun's tactical genius meant nothing against an enemy that could shrug off blaster fire and kill with a touch. The remaining ATSD attempted to crush Omega Red beneath its feet. It wrapped tentacles around both legs and pushed, toppling the walker onto its side, where it exploded in a fireball that illuminated the darkening canyon. And the rebels, fighting both Imperials and trying to avoid Omega Red, were being ground down by superior Imperial numbers despite the Russians' inadvertent assistance. Tyson made a desperate decision. Fall back to the valley entrance. We regroup, let the Empire and Omega Red kill each other. It was sound tactics, but it meant abandoning the battlefield to monsters, both the Soviet weapon and the fallen Jedi below. As the rebels retreated in organized squads, covering each other's withdrawal, Tyson felt the Force screaming warnings about what Jarek might accomplish if left unopposed. Omega Red stood alone among hundreds of corpses, breathing hard, body saturated with stolen life energy to the point of pain. He'd never drained this much, this quickly. The carbonadium poisoning was completely suppressed, his regeneration working at peak efficiency. He felt powerful in ways he hadn't since before the Soviet surgery. And beneath his feet, deep in the valley's heart, he felt something else, a tremor in reality itself. Jarek had reached the nexus point where thousands of Force spirits waited. The ritual had begun. Commander Yun's remaining forces, less than 30 stormtroopers, formed a defensive perimeter, weapons trained on Omega Red, but nobody was willing to fire first. They'd seen what happened to those who attacked. The commander himself stepped forward, helmet removed, revealing a scarred human face that had seen too many battles. "Stand down," Yun said quietly. "You've won. The mercenaries are routed, my forces decimated. Let us withdraw and we'll report that you perished in the fighting." Omega Red's tentacles coiled, considering. It was a reasonable offer. The Imperials weren't his true enemies. They were just following orders, same as he'd done for the Soviet Union. But then he remembered 6th Brother's Ash, 7th Sister's Lightning, the Empire's desire to enslave him. "No," Omega Red said. "You tell the Empire the truth. Tell them Omega Red cannot be captured, cannot be controlled, cannot be stopped. Tell them to stop hunting me, or I will come to their fortress worlds and drain life from their officers while they sleep." He released them, all of them. Let them flee to their shuttle and escape Rusin, carrying terror and warnings. The Empire needed to understand he wasn't a prize to be claimed. He was a plague to be avoided. As the Imperial shuttle lifted off, Omega Red turned toward the valley entrance. Deep below, power was building. Jarek was succeeding, absorbing the trapped Force spirits, becoming something beyond mere Jedi or Sith. The fallen Jedi would emerge as a god among Force users. And Omega Red would be waiting to drain that god dry. He descended into darkness, following ancient stone steps that hummed with accumulated Force energy. The walls were carved with histories of battles long forgotten, Jedi and Sith locked in eternal combat. At the bottom, a massive chamber opened, its ceiling lost in shadows, its floor a mosaic depicting the Force's light and dark in perfect balance. Jarek stood at the center, arms raised, violet energy crackling around him as hundreds of ghostly figures swirled overhead, the trapped spirits of the valley's dead. His body was changing, evolving, muscles bulging with power stolen from millennia of accumulated Force energy. When he spoke, his voice echoed with 1,000 dead voices. "I am become power incarnate. The valley's knowledge is mine. Light and dark, Jedi and Sith all bow before." Omega Red's carbonadium tentacle wrapped around Jarek's throat from behind, yanking the Darksider away from the nexus point. The Death Spore pulsed with every ounce of energy Omega Red possessed. "You talk too much," Omega Red growled. Jarek screamed as life energy, augmented by the valley's power, began draining into Omega Red's carbonadium skeleton. It was like drinking lightning, consuming fire, absorbing the essence of a god. The trapped Force spirits sensed what was happening and recoiled in horror. This wasn't a Force user claiming power. This was an absence consuming light and dark equally. Jarek fought back with devastating Force lightning, telekinetic blasts that should have pulverized Omega Red's bones. But the Russian had absorbed too much life energy, his body operating beyond human limits. He held on through agony that would have killed normal men, draining and draining until Jarek's enhanced body began withering despite the valley's power flowing through him. The rebel commandos burst into the chamber, led by Tyson, whose force senses were screaming at the abomination occurring. He saw Omega Red locked in lethal embrace with a being that blazed with stolen power, saw the Russian's tentacles wrapped around Jarek like a parasitic vine consuming its host. "Stop him," Tyson shouted. "He's disrupting the valley's balance." Blaster fire erupted. Omega Red's tentacles deflected most shots, but several struck home, burning through flesh that was too focused on draining Jarek to regenerate properly. He roared in pain and fury, but didn't release his grip. Jarek's body collapsed into ash, just like Sixth Brother. But this time, the power that flooded into Omega Red was catastrophic. Force energy, light and dark mixed, thousands of spirits worth of accumulated power, all channeling through Carbonadium that was never meant to conduct mystical energy. Omega Red screamed as his body began tearing itself apart from the inside. Too much power, too much energy, his cellular structure couldn't contain it. The Carbonadium skeleton that had cursed him was now the only thing keeping him alive, conducting force energy that would have vaporized flesh alone. The valley responded. The trapped spirits, freed from Jarek's domination but disrupted by Omega Red's consumption, surged outward in a wave of pure force energy. The explosion hurled rebels across the chamber, cracked the ancient mosaic, and sent shockwaves through Rusin's planetary crust. When the light faded, Omega Red knelt at the epicenter, body smoking, tentacles retracted but alive. Impossibly alive. The force energy had burned through him, purged itself, but left something behind. His Carbonadium skeleton now hummed with residual energy, not quite light, not quite dark, something in between. Tyson approached cautiously, lightsaber ignited. I don't even know what you've done. Disrupted the valley, consumed a dark sider, tainted yourself with force energy you can't possibly control." Omega Red looked up and his eyes had changed. Still human, still pale, but now they held depths that suggested something beyond mere biology. "I survive," he rasped. "Is all I ever do." "We should kill you," Myra said, her rifle trained on his head. "For what you are, what you've done." "Try," Omega Red said without emotion. "See if you succeed where Empire failed, where Jarek failed, where everyone fails." Tyson felt the Force whispering guidance. Kill this abomination, remove him from the galaxy before he causes more harm. But he also sensed something else, potential. Omega Red had consumed force energy without being corrupted or destroyed. He'd become something unique, unprecedented. A weapon that could fight force users on their own terms while remaining outside their traditional dichotomy. "Go," Tyson said finally, lowering his lightsaber. "Leave this place. Don't let me find you preying on innocents again." Omega Red rose unsteadily, his body still adjusting to residual force energy in his skeleton. "Innocents? In this galaxy?" he laughed bitterly. "Everyone is guilty of something, but I will choose my prey carefully, is best I can offer." He walked past the rebels, tentacles supporting his weight, moving like a broken puppet trying to remember how to be human. They let him pass. What else could they do? Kill him and risk whatever force energy remained in his body exploding. Capture him and become jailers of something that could drain life through prison walls. Omega Red emerged from the Valley of the Jedi into Rusin's night. The binary suns had set, leaving only stars and the distant glow of burning Imperial equipment. He'd survived another impossible situation, but this time it felt different. The Carbonadium poisoning was still there, but quieter, suppressed by force energy he didn't understand and couldn't control. He'd come to this galaxy as a weapon. He'd become something else, not quite monster, not quite savior, but a force that existed in the spaces between light and dark, life and death, civilization and chaos. In orbit above Rusin, Imperial commanders compiled reports about the disaster. The rebellion's intelligence officers tried to understand what had occurred in the valley, and across the Outer Rim, criminal organizations updated their files on the pale-skinned killer who'd become a legend. Omega Red had carved his name into the Star Wars galaxy with blood and carbonadium. Some would hunt him, others would fear him. A few might even try to recruit him again, foolishly believing they could control what the Soviet Union had unleashed. But Arkady Rossovich had learned the most important lesson this galaxy could teach. Power meant nothing without the will to use it on your own terms. He was a weapon that chose its targets, a parasite that picked its prey, a monster that decided who deserved to be drained. The Empire would remember the Red Death, so would the rebellion, and when the galaxy looked to the shadows, wondering what nightmares lurked there, they would whisper his name as a warning. Omega Red, the Soviet specter who drained Force users and walked away. The man who'd turned the Valley of the Jedi into his personal feeding ground. The weapon no faction could claim. He vanished into Rusin's wilderness, heading toward the nearest spaceport, ready to steal a ship and disappear into the vast galactic expanse. Behind him, the valley slowly healed, its balance disrupted but not destroyed. The Force would recover. The factions would rebuild their forces. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, a Russian monster would continue his eternal hunt for the life energy that kept him alive one more day. The galactic civil war would continue for years after the Battle of Rusin, but those who'd witnessed Omega Red's rampage would never forget. The Empire classified him as Threat Level Omega, a designation reserved for beings capable of destabilizing entire sectors. Rebel Alliance intelligence flagged him as unpredictable asset extreme threat, to be avoided unless necessary. But Omega Red cared nothing for their classifications. He'd found a twisted equilibrium in this vast galaxy, hunting slavers, Imperial officers, Hutt enforcers, anyone whose death would satisfy both his hunger and his conscience. He was no hero, but he'd chosen to be something more than the mindless weapon the Soviet Union had created. The carbonadium skeleton still poisoned him, still demanded regular feeding. But the residual Force energy from the valley had changed him in ways even he didn't fully understand. His Death Spore could now affect Force-sensitive beings more efficiently, and his tentacles carried traces of energy that resisted lightsabers for crucial extra seconds. He'd become the galaxy's most dangerous independent operative, too lethal to ignore, too unpredictable to use, too resilient to eliminate. And in the shadows of the Outer Rim, whispers continued to spread. Stories of a pale humanoid with metal tentacles who killed through touch, a monster who chose his prey, a weapon that answered to no master. The Red Death had found its place in the Star Wars galaxy, not as villain or hero, but as something far more terrifying, a force of nature that operated by its own brutal code, reminding every faction that some weapons could never be controlled. They could only survive. May the Force be with you. More stories await.